best, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be here, and it was with interest, Jill, I was listening to you talk about the use of technology, which is a challenge for us all into the future. And a number of months ago I was at a forum on bullying, and I was a keynote speaker, and I was listening to the previous conversation that took place, and they were talking about the digital generation, about those are the young people that are really digital savvy, right through to the digital dinosaurs, and I thought this was a fascinating conversation. So when I got up I said, look, I was fascinated with that conversation, and I said, unfortunately, like Jill, I've had to learn how to use technology. You know, we are growing, I need it for my job, I need to do it well, but I said, I've got this strong desire when I retire to become a digital dinosaur. So I've got this thing where I don't want to have a mobile phone and no email account. So that's why people say I won't achieve it, but it's just a dream, I suppose. But it is something because we do rely on it for everything we do these days. Look, Victoria Police, we're a large organisation. We've got over 14,000 employees, and we perform a broad range of functions to provide a safe, secure and orderly society. You know, you see us every day out there doing public order policing, criminal investigations, crime prevention. You know, we've got the role to play with national security, road policing, emergency management, and just calls for service to help those in need. It is a broad range of functions we do, but we rely absolutely on the community to support us with what we do. So what I'm going to do tonight is just talk a little bit about what we do and how we run as an organisation, and probably touch in a little bit more detail on some of the things that Graham spoke about earlier, and I'll talk about my challenges as well, running Crime Command. Just to talk a little bit about that, you may be interested in some of the things that we're doing there. But look, about 18 months ago, the Chief Commissioner launched the blueprint, and as Graham said, that was a bit of a plan for us over the next 3 years. And it's looking at what our challenges are in terms of a whole range of areas. And the whole focus of that blueprint is about the front line. And it's about the front line first. So we've got our members out on a daily basis providing service to the community, responding to all sorts of incidents. And we said every area of Victoria Police should be absolutely focused on making the job for members on our front line a lot easier. And so that's the focus of the blueprint. And we've got a number of steering committees or corporate committees that sit under executive command, which run the organisation, chaired by the Chief. But these particular committees are focused on providing support to the front line, looking at the issues across the board. One of those is Service Delivery Committee, Police Service Delivery, and that's chaired by Deputy Commissioner Graham Ashton. We've got another one in relation to community safety, which is chaired by Deputy Commissioner Tim Cartwright. We've got one working with our stakeholders, which is chaired by Deputy Commissioner Lucinda Nolan. And Achieving Through Our People, which is chaired by Executive Director Tony Bates, and Developing Developing Our Business, which is chaired by Executive Director Cliff Owen. And all of these committees have got a particular role. Each month we do monthly reporting from all the regions, all the commands across the organisation. We put in a report of what we consider to be the emerging issues, the risks and things like that, and they're all categorised under each of those headings that I've just run through there. And we look at those particular issues. So we expect the regions and the commanders of each of those regions and the directors to highlight these are the risks that the organisation needs to be aware of, and generally they'll talk about what they're actually doing. But on occasions, at these particular committees, we might say this needs to be taken up at a state level. So we might say it's been handled well under a particular command. It is an issue that on occasions that we might need to take up with government or with other government departments to say, look, we need a better integrated or coordinated approach to deal with this. One of the issues that we're dealing with at the moment is prisoners. We have got our police cells at full capacity at the moment, and we're working on a daily basis with corrections and government to work through how do we manage this situation. And corrections have been doing a great job in freeing up and getting more beds, but you know, I think Graham touched on it before. One of our key focuses for reducing crime is focusing on recidivist offenders, and we're not going to stop doing that because they're causing the greatest harm to the community. So when you keep locking people up, eventually they're going to get bail refused, and eventually they'll be imprisoned. So there's a whole range of things that we're doing. We're probably adding to that workload, but we can't really slow down what we're actually doing. Graham talked about the integrated risk management and planning process, and really that planning process he talked about is we're going through that process at the moment and we're getting better with it. Historically we did our planning, it was all isolated, nothing was linked. Risk management wasn't linked to our corporate planning, and nor was the budget allocation. And so we're trying to actually integrate the way we do our business, and part of it's looking at what's happening out in the communities, in the regions, because it's frontline first. So all areas of the organisation are required to do a profile under each of those categories. Police service delivery, community safety, achievement for our people, business management, the whole lot. So every year we put a profile together and it comes from the bottom up. And basically, so my command at the moment is going through that process, as is Graham. So they'll do it at divisional level, it will feed up to the respective regions, and it will go into town, to the chairs of each of those particular committees. Now what we do is a statewide profile, you know, that's probably will be completed early next year. And that's looking at what's come from the bottom up, what are the issues. It's a warts and all document. It's what's actually hurting us on the down, what do we need in terms of support for members at particular stations, what are they saying? What are our stakeholders saying? Because stakeholder engagement is a key for us. We work with communities, we work with other government departments, we work with business. And so it's a warts and all, we need to find out what they think of us, not just about us coming and talk to you and talking to you and not listening. We're saying, what are our stakeholders saying? And so this goes into a document which goes up, and we do a statewide profile. And that actually informs the way we do business for the next 12 months. Because we actually get a number of projects that fall out of those particular profiles, and that's really looking at how we can make the job easier for our members on the front line. It might be where we need to focus our resources. It might be a new way of doing business. It might be something where we need to try and influence government for legislative change or policy change. But it's about feeding that up right through, and as I said, these documents, we're getting better at them. They're very informative. The one on community safety in particular is really an statewide intelligence assessment, looking at the crime picture across the state. And that's drawing on both national data, statewide data from the grassroots up. And, but there's a lot of work that goes into these particular documents. Some of the immediate challenges, I'll talk about a couple of those projects on the way through, because I had the you know, I've had the pleasure of actually completing one of those recently, and I get a lot of, well, I call it hate mail, but it's probably not really hate mail, but it's just complaints about the way we introduce new policy. But look, some of the challenges we've got, 1,700 new police, you know, have got to be recruited by the end of next year, and that's a big challenge. So at the moment we've got 500 additional police for this financial year. And that's a significant recruitment campaign, plus over 400 PSAs. So if you go out to our police academy at the moment, you'll see there's been rapid growth in infrastructure. We've got a lot of portables there. That's putting a lot of strain in terms of just training our members up, new members, and putting them on the road is a big task. And but we're doing it really well. But it's not just that; it's about the ongoing training for our members, because we've got to look whilst they come through, they do the, you know, they go and get their basic training. Training never stops in this organisation. So the challenge for us into the future is looking at what are the new skill sets we need to provide our members. And I can talk about crime, for example. We've got a detective training school, field investigators course, and I look at the challenges that I've got within Crime Command. I've got some centralised areas in terms of specialists. Some of those are in the area of e-crime, digital specialists. We've got people that do criminal proceeds, for example, you know, when we seize assets and that. But whilst I've got some great expertise there, the trouble is a lot of the work's been done out in the regions and we don't have that expertise. And my central areas are getting bogged down in where they should be working on high-level organised crime and other things. The specialists are getting bogged down doing what you'd call basic work that we should be skilling our members up for. Because technology is changing that fast, we need to think about how do we skill up our members into the future. What skills do they need? So there's some real big challenges there at the moment. So we're working with the detective training school on that, because, just by way of example and how important it is, that because their workload is so extensive, they actually have to prioritise. And so we'll often get members ring up from stations, and we might say, look, we will not be able to do that job. And recently we had a member ring our e-crime squad, and this is just a bit of a story, and he'd charged the drug dealer, and seized about $60,000 cash from him, and this bloke was trafficking. And of course we seized equipment and mobile phones and all that because we interrogated all that. But our e-crime couldn't go out and do that at the time. It was low on the category of priorities. But interestingly, the member did ring up the inspector in charge one day, and the inspector said, "Oh, can you run that by me again?" And so he ran it by him again. He said, "Look, I think we might send someone out and have a look at that file that you've got there," because he said, "I think that's a Bitcoin wallet." Now, Bitcoin is currency, and it's real currency online. You can actually buy bullion with it over in WA. So this person, when we opened up, we found there was a wallet on there with Bitcoin in it. And I won't go through the amount at the time, but it was quite, when it was purchased, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoin. When we opened the wallet, after many months, and it nearly overloaded our system to move everything from that wallet, because we had to log onto the internet to see if there was actually money in the wallet. At the time we opened that wallet, it was worth about $3.6 million. Now, it's a very fluid, dynamic money. So we've seized that, and we're trying to restrain it because we're wondering why he came to court with a silk and, and then we hit them with the notice. But that money's jumped up to 7 million. It's so fluid, it's up and down, and we're trying to work out how do we do that. Now, it's the first time we've ever done that anywhere in the world. Like, I think the USDA seized $11 in Bitcoin, but we've trumped that. But it's the sort of, these are the sort of challenges, and like if you don't have an organisation that's skilled up and knowledgeable about this, it's important that we do keep ahead of technology. It's advancing in so many ways that we need to keep on top of it. But with the ongoing training, it's also about the allocation of resources. So they're all going out to police for many years, and basically, but the allocation is for uniformed police, but we've actually got a lot of demands on us. So I had a look, and I looked at, we had over 600 applications, heads for 150, and I had to go through a process, and we did it. But we still haven't had a decision made on that because it's a really complex issue for us. Because, we need flexibility in an organisation. We've got some areas in Victoria Police, and this is about industrial relations, where we would say some stations have got more police than they need, when you look at the demand. But we can't just move them from that particular division they're in because of IR issues. So we haven't got that flexibility. We might say we need to move them to another division where we've got the growth, rapid growth, because we're struggling to keep up with some of those growth areas. But the trouble we have with that is you might have to wait for attrition, but when people transfer out. Now that could take 10 years in some divisions. And particularly in the eastern region, we've got little movement, and that's an issue. So you might see some areas and stations or divisions are over-resourced when you look at the demands in other areas, but we can't just go and move it. So that's a challenge for us in terms of getting that flexibility into the future. If I look at the rapid growth, what ordinarily, or what will often come with rapid growth is potential for corruption into the future. I did some media on the Kiel Task Force yesterday in relation to a corrupt member at a local police station. But we've also identified others when we've gone through that. And history shows that when you actually have rapid growth in any policing organisation around the world, the chances for corruption to creep into the future are really high. And the reason for that is because we don't have the number of supervisors. They're very inexperienced. We're going through rapid growth, so do your supervisors. So it's absolutely critical. And if you don't have that frontline supervision, you don't have people setting the standards and maintaining the standards, you're going to let corruption and malfeasance creep in. So that's a real challenge for us, and fortunately our Chief Commissioner is right onto this. He's certainly pushing the accountability right down to everyone, right from the top of the organisation. We're clear on what we're responsible for, what we're accountable for, and we're pushing it down. And we're rolling out new frameworks for supervision to make sure that our members are being held account. We've had a rough time with this unauthorised release of information. We've had issues and allegations of racism and things like that. They're significant challenges for us because we expect our members to act in a professional manner on all occasions. And by and large, they do. They do a fantastic job. But every now and then we get someone let us down. And it's unacceptable because that really damages our reputation. If our reputation is damaged, we do not get the support of the community. And we need the community to help us do our job. It's absolutely critical. And obviously with a fast-growing organisation, safety is our number one priority. We want to make sure our members are safe. We don't want them coming home injured or getting killed in the line of duty. And that is a real key focus, and we've certainly driven our work cover claims quite significantly over the last probably 18 months, 2 years in particular. It's a key focus for us all. But when we train our members up to approach high-risk situations, we have a lot of specialist trained units to actually support them on the road. And if you actually had a look every day, our members put in incident fact sheets. So if there's a significant incident they'll go to, it'll go in. And one of the things we all do at Command is read what's happened. When I was at North West Metro, I'd be reading the incidents that took place overnight. First thing I'd be going for, who's been injured? So I didn't want to see any of our members injured. Fortunately, yes, we do get members injured, but fortunately a lot of those injuries are not serious, and that's because of our training, the way they approach situations where they back each other up. But it's amazing to see the sort of situations they go to, and it's you know, because what we're dealing with in the community at the moment, we are dealing with a lot of mental health issues. You know, a lot of our time is tied up responding to situations where we've got people that are suffering from some sort of mental illness or substance abuse, and they are just off their heads at times. You know, and yeah, our members, even when they're emergency services or doctors or ambulance officers are trying to help them, you've got them violently struggling, and our members might come, and some of their associates are trying to attack them. And all sorts of things happen in those scenarios. So we're quick to deal with that. But it's amazing, you know, when you read incident fact sheets, the number of members that just get spat at, you know, in the face with blood and eyes. It happens almost on a daily basis when you, particularly in the city on the weekends. It's quite amazing, and that's the sort of stuff they're dealing with. Not just for police, but emergency service, you know, where ambulance officers and even doctors and things like that in hospitals. So there is, you know, whilst there's always been violence in the community, the level of violence in terms of where it does happen seems with some of these situations, because of it might be a combination of mental illness or substance abuse, does escalate the situation. And we've talked about issues with ice, and well, I'm not allowed to say ice because the drug squad tell me it's amphetamine type stimulants. But methamphetamine, it is quite significant, and they do talk about it, but that is the number one in terms of the issue for us across the community at the moment. Yes, we've got drugs, but let's go back one on this, because Graham talked about alcohol being an issue. That is a significant issue in our community. If you look at alcohol, you look at substance abuse. Ice is the number one at the moment, but if you go back and have a look at what we've got out there, we have got a glut of drugs in our society. Not just overuse of prescription drugs, but also illicit drugs. You know, Australia, and it's a national disgrace to be quite honest, that's my opinion, are probably one of the highest users of illicit substances in the world. And it is a disgrace. And I have a look at what's coming in over the borders through the organised crime. We are being targeted. Now the issue here is we talk about alcohol being a driver, we talk about drugs, but this is a real issue. We've actually got to change the culture within our community and change the thinking that it's okay, or that we need to drink, or we need to take drugs to have a good time. You know, years ago, when I was at North West, we ran a pag dog operation at some of these public events. We get criticised if we don't, and someone overdoses at the event. And so we had one particular event coming up, and they said, look, why don't we do the biggest pad dog operation we've ever done? Because we thought if we get some media on this, we knew that with this particular event we were going to get a large number of young people coming in with drugs. And we did. We locked up over 220 young people, and we hadn't even scratched the surface. And we did some media on it. Now, most of those people were on the diversion program, so they run it really well at these events. So we have, you know, we take the drugs off them. If it's not a trafficable quantity and it's just for personal use, you know, we divert them, you know, through Turning Point. We have Turning Point counsellors there, and they get referred. And there's probably a 75% success rate. But so it's done really well at those events. But the thing that worried me is that we hadn't touched the surface, and these young people are out there, large numbers, using these sort of substances, and they are young. And they get onto things like ice. I'll use ice because it's highly addictive, and it absolutely changes your life. They become very aggressive on it. It's a really harmful drug. But if I look at what else is out there, the challenges, we've got cannabis, for example. Cannabis has always been one of the largest. Now, we are probably supplying the nation in cannabis. Now, I could go out, I've got a list of probably 40 or 50 houses we could tip over today where we think they've got cannabis grow houses. Some of our divisions are telling us we've got 200 grow houses in here. But I don't have the resources to do this. We have to prioritise. What's causing the greatest harm is methamphetamine. You know, the regions are under the gun to reduce crime. So we know this is out there, so it's making us rethink how do we tackle the issue of grow houses, for example. So last year we had an operation called Taxa where we said we'll just do one a day. So we had the regions provide some sources and we went out one a day. We just took them out and probably over 40 days we executed, we seized actually 48 grow houses. And we continued that, but we had the resources had to go back to the regions. Now we've seized well over 90. Now these are really elaborate setups. But what we're doing, we said if anyone's in there, they get charged. If not, we're just pulling it apart. And we'll do the background checks, seize the houses, because a lot of these houses are now being purchased. It's based on a model. You know, there's a, I suppose I'll go into Canadian nationals, basically. Canadian organised crime groups are targeting, you know, a lot of the problems we've got with drugs in the community. Now, the particular model that they're using with grow houses is a Canadian model. And basically they buy the houses and they just rent them out, they set them out, fit them up with every room, basically set up growing grass and basically, you know, the first payment might pay, you know, first deal, like, you know, crop might pay for most of the house, and so they've got that ongoing investment. So what we basically did was just go through, take them out. We'll probably have an effect, but we had to put our resources elsewhere. So we've come up with a new model, and I've got a strategy on how we'll do this so we can do it more effectively from time to time. So I'll tell you, before that we might do an 8-month investigation and go out and do 40 or 50 addresses or 80. And that's a lot of work, but it really wasn't having an impact. So there's a whole range of things that we're thinking about. How do we redo the business? How do we disrupt this activity? How do we take the assets? And you know, we had a matter recently where we have charged a few and we have seized the assets, and they're quite happy to plead guilty, for example, but if you don't take our assets. Well, that's the offer. So that is a genuine offer that's been made recently to go, well, let's do this. So if I go down in terms of, so Graham talked about our Victoria Police Intelligence Doctrine, which is really the way, leading the way we do business, and also the Advanced Investigation Management. The intelligence doctrine has a beast called state tasking and coordination. Tasking and coordination at all areas in the regions, down to local area command, up to the top area, the top of the organisation. I've got one for organised crime. But basically it's state tasking coordination, and it was every 2 weeks for 12 months, now it's once a month. And often the Chief Commissioner will come to these meetings, he'll just pop in, he doesn't, so he just sits there watching, because at the moment our focus is on driving crime down. Volume crime, as Graham said, is a significant issue. So, you know, we look at crimes against property, crimes against the person. And so we have a look at what's going on across the state. Every week, Graham will get a list of what's happening with his crimes. Crime stats in his area, broken right down, with predictive analysis and things like that. And there's an expectation that he's allocating and prioritising his resources to actually drive that crime down. And at a state level, we sit there and have a look at it as well. And I often get tasked with certain projects from, you know, because the state one is run by the deputies, the Chief Commissioner will pop in, our intelligence AC's there, I'm there from crime, but all the regions are there and some of the supports. And we're all being held to account for what we're doing to respond to crime. It's not going too well in certain areas. So, you know, a superintendent from a local area like Graham might get invited, come along with his inspectors to talk about what they're doing, about, say, the spike in car thefts or the spike in burglaries or something like that in the area. On occasions we will, and we have in a number of our hotspots, we have devoted state resources to support them. We've devoted intelligence practitioners to go out and help build their capability, and that's a key focus. We are getting a lot smarter with how we actually target and focus our activities, and as Graham said, it is on targeting recidivist offenders, targeting those high-risk community locations, and it's also about trying to prevent repeat victimisation, particularly in the area of family violence. Family violence is a significant driver. We have got very good with the reporting, and if you look at it, it accounts for about 40% of our crimes against a person. And I actually had a look at some data that come out, and it's not official stats, but I had a look at the statewide data just that we look at each week, and they've actually got it with the family violence stats in, and they can take the family violence stats out. When actually, this is the first time I had a look at it the other day, they took the family violence stats out, and it was actually going down in the crimes against person property at a state level when you took family violence out. So it is a significant contributor, because it's not just violence, it's also property crime can be related. So it's a significant issue, but we have got a very good model in place. We're still working, that's one of our key projects, to work with referral agencies and others to provide support for the victims and try to prevent repeat offending. One of the things the Chief Commissioner wants to do is get more men to stand up and talk about it and say it's not acceptable, because you see a lot of reporting from women, but it's about men taking a leadership role in this, and that's what we're trying to influence with a forum we're running in the near future. I'll talk, you might have heard a little bit about child pornography the other day. The AFP put out the release in relation to that. That's a significant issue. I've got a task force course at Stria that looks at that online child offending. Now, what our focus in that area, we can have a look. We've got thousands of addresses we could go to today. I need to be able to access. It's a big issue, nationwide, worldwide. And people are just downloading volumes and volumes and volumes of material. And I won't go into the graphic details of what we actually see through this, but our focus, not only in Victoria Police, but nationally, and with our international partners, is to identify the victims. And with all this material. So, you know, what we do, and on occasions we have identified victims in America, the UK and other nations. We don't care where they are, as long as we're identifying them, getting them to a safe place. And that's the attitude we take with our people, you know, through our relationships, working with other law enforcement agencies. And, you know, sometimes when we get that much material, it's hard to prioritise. And so we have been working with our interstate counterparts. Through ANSPA, we've got a child protection working group, and they have identified certain methodology that we can do that actually might help us prioritise the vast thousands of documents you might download from a computer that a person's got, to actually look at where the source of some of this material comes from. There's actually, when you look at the file names and things like that, it actually can help you narrow down where the original source might have come from. And you might identify that's a person overseas or interstate, but that actually helps us communicate with those other agencies to try and track down the victims. So they're getting very sophisticated there. But on the same token, if we go from there across to our sex offences, you know, sex offences is probably one of the areas that we get called out to on a regular basis. I've got 4 teams on call each night with different expertise. Homicides, we've got sex offences, clan labs, and just general response, particularly with armed crime. And they're the things that we're getting called out for all the time. And so, you know, the response in terms of just keeping on top of sex offences is quite significant. But if you look at technology, and DNA in particular, which has been fantastic, we've got an added workload now. We've gone back through the freezer, we've pulled everything out, and we've analysed it with the new technology. So I've got a cold case unit at sex crimes that we're pulling files out, and we could go back for years, back into the 80s, where we've identified serial rapists, but we've got to pull all those files out historically, go back to the victims, see if they want to go ahead, and then reinvestigate those. We've identified unknown serial offenders as well. But the fact is, we do know they're there, and we're focusing on it. It takes time to go through all these particular files. But the technology's been absolutely fantastic in terms of that forensics and leading the way we go. But we've got a pretty big workload for that. And then we've got the SANO task force that's been set up as a result of the parliamentary inquiry and also the Royal Commission. We've probably got about 165 cases on the books at the moment. And some of those are quite complex investigations. So there's a lot of historical files that we're actually going through at crime to deal with matters there. We've talked about well, we haven't talked about OMCGs. I know the attorney is very interested in this, but you know, organised motorcycle gangs are criminal organisations, and they have a significant footprint across not only Victoria but the nation, and they are growing. They're setting up a lot of chapters in country Victoria, and make no mistake, these people are involved in very serious and organised crime. And so we have been putting a lot of pressure on them, and it's been working quite well, but there are also threats coming out of that work, you know, probably aimed at law enforcement and others as a result. So we've got to keep the pressure on, and we're working really well with our national partners to keep that pressure on. But they are a significant problem in this state, and will be for quite a while. We've just got to keep that pressure and keep moving, because they're involved in a whole range of activities. And we're starting to, since we've started our refocus on them a number of years ago, we're getting a really good picture of what they're doing. We're learning more and more every day. But they're not the only groups that are operating in the community. We talked about, you look at the all the organised crime, we are getting targeted by international syndicates, and the Canadian syndicates in particular. And if I look at the largest seizures we've had at the borders of ICE, chemicals coming overseas, from overseas through imports, we've had significant seizures. A lot of them are coming from Canadian nationals, organised crime syndicates. So I'll talk about a little bit about that, because this organised crime is quite significant. And we're actually doing a lot of work in joint relationships now. With some of my peers, they might say, well, why are you doing this? Why are you doing importations? But we've got a joint organised crime task force, we've got a joint counter-terrorism task force, we've got the Trident task force that looks at the docks. And working in those joint arrangements has actually given us the better ability and better bang for buck in terms of identifying these syndicates and actually taking them out. We bring a particular expertise to those joint arrangements, and we're often leading the joint arrangements in terms of we have the lead investigators, and particularly on the docks. And what we're finding through those joint arrangements, we're identifying where the vulnerabilities are. We've identified how the Commonwealth agencies work, and we're identifying gaps in particular areas. And through that work, we're actually starting to plug those gaps up. But we're also identifying these syndicates, and we're trying to cut their head off rather than have the large volumes coming at the jurisdiction, cut it off at the end. And you know, we're getting better and better. They say that Victoria's got the best relationship in the nation in terms of our joint arrangements, and we have. We're getting some really good results. That's not just in joint organised crime, but even in terrorism. The joint, last week we actually set up a joint analyst group, which is a standing one. It's the first standing one in the nation where we've got, and we're actually leading that, but it's hosted at the Australian Crime Commission. But we've got a number of agencies, and the advantage of that, it gives us access to the all the federal data through their fusion centre. And I've already got a list of tasks for them because I chair the joint management group that oversights all this, and we've given them a pretty big workload. And part of that is actually looking at the issues in terms of gaps we've identified and how we can better target some of the syndicates operating. Another issue in terms of national security. So terrorism is an issue. It will always be an issue, national security. Overseas conflict does have a significant impact on Australia. There's no doubt about that. And we've seen that with a number of the terrorism-related investigations. At the moment, the Syrian war is probably the one of the most, it's the largest national security issue we've got. And it's going to be there for a number of years. So every year, you know, we work pretty closely on this, and we're monitoring it closely. And the issue with that is we might have to ramp up our resources at any time to deal with these issues, and we do, and that's how crime works. We do operate on a model where we just pull the resources in when we need them. If you looked at the size of ECHO's task force, for example, it's working on the OMCGs. It's very small, very small. If you compared it to, say, New South Wales, Queensland and others. You know, they've got hundreds of members, we've only got probably less than 20. But it's the way we mobilise the organisation to do the job. They do a fantastic piece of work. The firearms is a significant issue in the community. What we found, we haven't been proactive enough in that area. We've been very reactive, responding to shooting incidents and things like that, so we're trying to change the focus of crime in terms of how it responds, because firearms are a significant issue out there. And we're finding not only in terms of the use in crime, but you know, they're being targeted now for thefts, particularly in rural areas where we have properties that are broken into and large numbers of firearms are stolen. And they've been used in crime, there's no doubt about that. So our focus is changing on how we track these people down. I want to talk a bit about crime prevention. I know I'm running out of time here, but crime prevention or crime reduction is a key focus, and some of these projects we do are in relation to crime prevention. And one I got to do was dealing with petrol theft. The Chief Commissioner, we had a significant spike in petrol theft, and the Chief Commissioner gave me a project to run with the superintendent to say we need to do something about this. So we did. Over a 12-month period, we engaged with the industry. We had them, we hosted them at a forum we had at one of our police complexes, and we had discussions with them. The Chief Commissioner came, we had members come and say, look, I spent 4 or 5 hours running around doing a job chasing up a petrol drive-off to find out someone forgot to pay. And on other occasions, people were walking into petrol stations saying, I'm not paying, just give me the thing and I'll fill my details out and walk. And it was quite clear that we were being used as debt collectors on occasion. And we said, and we talked about this with the industry, we said this is actually a preventable offence. You can actually stop this, or the vast majority of it. We said if you change your practices. And it'd be quite interesting to hear what some of them said, particularly some of the big retailers. Oh, we can't afford to do that. I said, you've got to be joking. Where are you from? You know, like in terms of setting up things at the Bowsers. So after having a number of forums with them, we actually said, well, if you're not going to change your practices, we're going to change our practices. It's done nearly everywhere around the world. So we did, and we've pushed more accountability back on the industry. We're still taking reports of thefts, and we're still investigating thefts of petrol. We're still investigating recidivists. We won't do a one-off, but we actually do track people that are recidivist offenders, and we are locking them up. So we have reduced the petrol theft, but it's certainly not in the volume. But we are actually pushing the accountability back on the industry. The other thing the Chief said, and he wants to really take on the industry, because Graham talked about tap and go on those credit cards. Now, I didn't ask for it, it's there. You can all write to your financial institution and say you don't want it activated, because the reality is people are knocking off your cards from cars. They're actually stealing it from the mail again now. And so those crooks are running around, tap and go, anything under $100, you just tap, no questions asked, no PIN number, no nothing. They've made it that easy. And so what we're saying is, with industry, we want to take them on. So you've actually introduced new practices, which is actually changing the way crime. You're actually encouraging crime. You know, we've got certain large retailers, and this is the other thing, Dan Murphy's, for example, they've got numerous exits, no controls on them, and people just walk out with a slab, and then they come to us with a video and say, we want you to investigate this. We're saying, actually, you've changed your practices with no regard to security. So the Chief's quite clear on this. We want industry to take responsibility. So in finances, with fraud, there's a whole range of things we've got in terms of challenges there to rethink and put the pressure back on. Number plates is another one. Graham mentioned the theft of number plates has increased. So we've been talking with big roads. We'd like them to bring in a new type of number plate. I've had a number of prototypes. So if you pull them apart, if you try to take them off the car, it falls apart. And that would be quite helpful, because we've got a large volume, and we said, let's change the technology, you know, because the reality is the Chief actually said, I don't want one-way screws. You know, like, don't come back with a solution. He wants something innovative, and that's what we should be doing, to think about how we can be more innovative in reducing crime. I'll keep moving very quickly. Road policing is always a focus for us. And today, I think we're 49 under last year, which is fantastic. Touch wood. We'll keep driving it down. But we're trying, with our partners, we're very ambitious in how we might be able to continue to keep driving, not only the road fatalities, but road trauma down. That is going to remain a key focus. And the use of technology, ANPR, automatic number plate recognition, all those sorts of things is absolutely critical to us. The other issues we've got, emergency management. That's going to be high on our agenda into the future. We've got climate change. I've been involved in that space for, for a number of years, and it's a critical thing where we need to keep our skills set up across the organisation. But the key to that is working with other agencies, and there's going to be changes to the arrangements. And so we've actually got to skill our members up. You know, we've got the launch of Fire Centre yesterday with the bushfire season coming ahead, and that's going to present significant challenges for us, because we need to resource up and scale up when there's an emergency there. And we talked about, one of the things we've talked about is community resilience, whether it be dealing with issues concerning emergencies or other types of things, about how communities bandy together and support each other. But one of the things about community resilience is being prepared. If you actually do plan and prepare, you can actually respond better, because you might, you know, if you lose your house or something during a fire, you've actually done some thinking about it in preparation for it. And communities can support each other. So it's important that communities do work together, particularly in the emergency management space. But one of the keys, and I often said when I was up at with my partners in emergency management, they were trying to go out and do community forums. I said, look, you've got Neighbourhood Watch. You've already got an established network there. So why don't you think about how you use existing networks to actually help build that community resilience? It's absolutely critical, because you know, when things get tough, it's how communities respond together. And there are a lot of existing networks out there that can be drawn on to actually support when the times are tough. Challenges ahead with, I think Graham mentioned, we've got new and emerging communities, or it was Jill talking about how do you communicate with them. We've got a lot of fast-growing communities across the state and into the future. Not only have we got to resource it, but we've got to work with the communities and support new and emerging communities, and that's a critical focus for us. And part of our stakeholder engagement is actually about how we engage with communities. How do we bring them along? How do we support them? How do we work with other government agencies or NGOs or industry to actually support and build their capability and help them integrate into society? It's very important. So that's a key focus for us in terms of our focus in terms of working with business, communities, government into the future. And because, as I said at the beginning, it's the only way we can do our job. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was the media. We love the media. So one of the advantages, and I love the media. Yeah, it's a love-hate relationship. We actually need them to do our job. But one of the things about social media, it actually changes the environment a little bit, because we can actually control what we put out. And we've been thinking about that in terms of social media, because we might be able to put out a full story rather than an edited version that you often read in the papers. And so there's thinking that we're doing. We've got a committee that's been set up looking at social media and how we might use it into the future. And because we get, and we tend to respond to the media all the time on requests. They get bits and pieces of information. They try to blackmail you at times, or particularly my area, because they have an interest in crime, but they get bits of a story, and they'll try, and you might say, look, if you go out with that story, you're going to compromise an investigation, you're going to put someone's life at risk. So if they say, well, hold off, you then owe them the story and things like that. So we're trying to think about how we can get more proactive and control it. And social media does provide that opportunity to actually, if we use it properly into the future, we can actually inform and provide a much more detail to the community. But look, I've been rattling on for quite a bit. I could keep talking, but I was given a certain time period, and I think I might have spoken for that time period looking at the clock, if that's right. So thanks very much for the opportunity to come in.